Ever wondered about the word self, myself, yourself, ourselves? And I really started thinking, do you know what? We need to break that down a little bit and get a clearer understanding, because we use this terminology in our lifestyle and it's like, well, what impact is that really in our real life? What does it actually mean? And I love the word self because it's a great analogy when you break it down into how we can become more centered and calm within ourselves and have a higher level of self-esteem. So I was meditating on it, and this is what came through, and I was just like, wow, that's really interesting and I'd quite like to share it. So I'm going to break it down probably into different videos, so it's a little series for each of the letters, because each one in itself is really a topic. So if you think about the word, myself, it's my and then self, and then it's ourselves, and then it's yourself. We kind of break them apart, but really when they're presented, they're always joined, aren't they? And self is something that is used. Who talks about the self? I think that is Bessel van der Walt. He talks very much about how in his internal and also Richard Dyke, I think they talk about the whole internal family systems of how we can reunite ourselves when we are traumatized, or if we've had attachment trauma, which is not as, people don't think it is as severe obviously as the big traumas. But one of the things that they talk about is the self, the inner child in the internal family systems. And then Bessel van der Walt, I think he speaks to the word self. And in that, it's the non-physical part of you. The self is what he refers to it. So I refer to it as well. Some people might say it's like, my higher source, some people might say it's God, whatever your religion is, it's a label that you have for something that's bigger than you, and that is a force for good, and it looks after you. It could be guardian angels, it can be your higher source, it could be whatever your label is that you're comfortable with, is what I'm going to encapsulate in the word self here, because we are really extensions of source energy. And so this physical form that we have is an extension of whatever this God source is that is relevant for you. And each of us has this, but it's an energetic form that vibrates into our bodies. And that's what when the person lives or passes, the difference is, if you think about it, is that the weight of the body stays all the same. But when the person passes away, the weight of the body is still the same, right? I remember this from Wayne Dwyer talking about that. And it's like, what's the difference? The difference is that the energy is no longer in the body. So the energy leaves the body effectively. And to me, that is the source energy, the thing that keeps us alive, that gives us that, joie de vivre, what it is that we're here to do. And the self is all encompassing, all loving. And how is it that in our modern day we've somehow managed to fracture that off? So we land up splitting the my and the self. We land up splitting the your and the self, yourself. You land up splitting ourselves from each other. And the whole point of, like, with my Kotahitanga wellness clinic concept is that in Maori, it means the reunification of one. It's the unification of oneself. So that if you think about it, oneself, well, one is one thing, isn't it? One is part of the self. Okay, self is part of the one. It's all encompassing. Myself, yourself, ourselves. Okay, it's one, and it works both ways. They've all got self in there, haven't they? the self is in every single one of those words. So it's a two-way junction. And quite often I think on a subconscious level, and through societal upbringings and impositions, dare I say, and teachings and indoctrinations, whether it be from schooling or, it could be religion, it could be cultural, it could be societal, whatever. And it's not through I don't think it's through any sort of conscious drive to be divisive, but it becomes that. And quite often it's I think, and it is my own personal opinion, I think it's the ego that gets overnourished, I suppose you could say. If we're overfeeding the ego takes control, and it's the ego that kind of I loved how Wayne Dwyer used to call it. He said the ego is EGO, edging God out. Okay, so God in his sense obviously is relative to his religion, but it could be, edging the source out, whatever your God is to you, whatever, if you believe in it, or energy or quantum force, whatever you want to call it. It causes that wedge and that separation, and it breaks things apart. And when you start breaking things apart, it's that the unity's not there anymore. So a lot of the healing needs to bring back the self back into the one, into yourself, into myself. Okay, my has to go back into self. I've got to let self come back into my world, into me. Okay, and I think that's where a lot of we get, we're supposed to be like this in order to be loved. You have to be like this in order, do this or say that or look like this or be something. Well, the self is an energetic form. You don't need big lips and long eyelashes and false nails in order to be, because eventually you're not going to have that anyway. We're all going to pass and we're all going to have nobodies. And that's the whole thing, is that there's actually more no body or no thing than there is something. So we have to have more. If you stand outside at night and you look up into the sky, I love this exercise that Eckhart Tolle shared years ago, and I love it. And you go out, you can do it during the day as well, but at night time, if you just stand outside, ideally on a clear night when it's not chucking with rain and not clouded, and you look up into the sky and you just look at the literally millions of stars, literally, and how much space there is out there. It's insane. Like, we are literally a blip in the universe. Like, we are just this tiny little dot. And if you look at those planetary size comparisons, and this is one of the exercises I do that sometimes this helps you, is like, you look at those different sizes of the planets, and where we are is this tiny little planet, and that's just in our universe. We don't even know what goes past our universe, what's on, further afield, because they haven't discovered it yet. But they do know that we have a multiverse now, multi-universes in the universe as it is to our current day scientific knowledge, right? So when you start looking at it, that you're on this tiny little dot, and you're this one person in billions with a tiny little, what would seem like a tiny little problem, but seems like a big problem when you're sitting in it, right? When you take that perspective, you just get how small it is. And this is the whole thing, is like that an energetic force is actually what drives our behavior, is what keeps us alive. This is the life force within us, the self that lives within us. And when we don't have it, then we've passed on, and we've actually become more energetic. We have become more nobody than somebody, because we've left the body behind. We are a no thing, and we came from no thing. So we will go back to no thing. So being a something is actually a temporary experience. And I think there's been an overemphasis on the ego, on the material, on the something, and less focus on the no thing, which is actually the bigger thing. I'm getting, well, I hope you're keeping up with me here. But the no thing has actually got more power than the something does, because it's the no thing that lives within the thing that gives it the energy to be something bigger, better, greater. And when it's unified and connected, you've got a lot more power than when you're fractured. And honestly, all psychology, honestly, to baseline it, is trying to heal fractured people. That's really what it comes down to. It's like, you know, our personalities fracture when we get traumatized by stuff. Things happen to us, we don't know how to handle it, we're not taught how to handle it, we're put down quite often for handling it, because, you know, you're not supposed to have problems. It's seen as a weakness quite often. People think there's something wrong with you, you get ostracized from that. So it fractures the personality, and you're not cohesive, you're not the one. And when you can get back to one, then all of this stuff just falls into place. You know, it all makes sense, and it makes it easier to get through life, because you're less affected by things that previously you were. Things that would have fractured you before, you become resilient to. So it's that, I call it coming home to yourself. Okay, and what is that for you? And the first step is acknowledging that difference, that the one and the self. And have you got has the ego wedged its way in there? Are you fractured? We all are to some degree. I don't think any of us, I think, you know, that would be a claim to saying I'm perfect. I don't know, you know, I don't think anybody can really claim that they're perfect, because, you know, we're all here to learn lessons. And, you know, maybe that's one of the reasons you found this video, is to go, maybe there's things that I'm now ready to face. I need to heal those fragments, you know, those issues that I haven't been brave enough to face, or I've been putting off, or I've been, you know, downplaying and saying they're not so bad. Or, you know, I'm ready to step up and take myself to the next level, and do, you know, like what I'm saying here with my Vicky Jane stuff is all about bringing you home to who you really are, reuniting you to your one self, to your kotahitanga, you know, making you whole again, and realizing that we're more nobody than we are somebody. And to realize that, and to tap that, because it's enormously powerful. It's the energy that creates worlds. And if that energy can create worlds, I mean, if you start tapping that, how amazing is your life going to be? You know, it's like, wouldn't you want to tap that? I think that's a great idea. That's what it's all about. Your shoes, your path, your way. Namaste.